Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Masters. We use words all the time, and the words we use are extremely important, especially if you're a leader wanting to create transformational changes. But I've traveled all over the world working with executives, C-suite leaders, CEOs from almost all of the Fortune 50 companies, as well as smaller companies. And I've found something globally that is true. And that is that they often use words that undermine the clarity and action they would like to have happen. So, with that said, our expert today is a master of influence and persuasion, Phil Jones. And he's going to teach us how to lead change by knowing exactly what to say in any situation. Phil started in business early in life. I seem to remember around age 14, and became the youngest ever winner of the British Excellence of Sales and Marketing Award. He's an entrepreneur who's founded 5 multi-million-dollar businesses, and he's a high-demand keynote speaker who shares his insights in over 56 countries so far and counting. Phil's the author of 7 best-selling books, including Exactly How to Sell, Exactly Where to Start, and his latest bestseller, Exactly What to Say, the magic words for influence and impact. And I really want to get into that one because that is spreading globally like you wouldn't believe. So welcome, Phil. Let's get you in here and talk about it.
Hey, Dan, thanks ever so much for inviting me to be part of the show. It's a delight to be here.
Yeah, and I had to cut a lot of your bio out, and there's a lot of it. But I'm going to encourage people to go and check you out a little bit later. But let's start out by the intriguing part is the word magic words.
Okay.
And I would love you to tell us a little bit more of what do you mean by magic words? Because exactly what to say, I love that. Tell me about magic words.
Well, what do I mean by magic words? I'm talking about words that talk straight to the subconscious brain. Words that can allow us to be able to create increased levels of efficacy within the decision making of others, or can insert curiosity gaps that create the ability for people to say things like, tell me some more about that.
Now, let me stop you right there, because you said something really important that I want to clarify a little further. That speak directly to the subconscious brain. And I know that's important, but just talk a little bit more about that before you go further, because I think that's a really important upfront concept to get solid here.
Well, I think what often people are looking at from an influence point of view is how do they manipulate or pressurize or push somebody towards a decision? And they think about, how do I turn somebody from a no to a yes? How do I get somebody to change their mind? What I've learned through my years of experience is actually the greatest cost to decision making, the thing that slows things down the most, is just indecision. People stuck in maybe, people who are procrastinating about what needs to happen next. So if you can talk to a part of the brain that is systemized and also almost algorithmic towards how it's going to respond on reflex or on impulse, then what you can do is you can increase the rate of decision. If you can increase the rate of decision, you can increase the rate of action. And if you can increase the rate of action, you can in turn increase the rate of transaction. And it is that easy. It's also that hard in order to be able to do so. And you mentioned a point even in the introduction is I've trained more than 2 million people now in over 59 different countries, 5 continents. And in all those scenarios, there are people that have hard work and vigor and tenacity and experience in their success story. But the ones that really crush it are the ones that have said in the moments that matter, what we call our critical conversations, is they reach for the right words at the right time to achieve the right outcome. They would know exactly what to say where it matters. And I've spent a lifetime trying to distill that down, because it isn't just about getting the result. It's how quickly you can get that result that can make the biggest impact upon the overall success factors. And magic words that talk to subconscious are examples of that. And I'm going to let you all into a secret. So the book, Exactly What to Say, is 23 sequences of words that talk straight to the subconscious brain. It is, kind of. What it also is 23 deep-rooted principles about influence and persuasion. Now, it would be very easy to write a giant encyclopedia about influence and persuasion, and people would struggle to find examples. That would be quite actually easy to do. And I think it was Mark Twain that first said that if I had more time, I'd have written a shorter letter. The same is true when it comes to crafting a book, right? You can put everything you know about a subject into the biggest body of work possible. Distillation is a touch more challenging. So what the magic words are examples of deep-rooted principles around influence and persuasion disguised as a word choice. That's how you can create efficacy on this. This is how you can help people to be able to find practical application in a quicker period of time, because they think the words are magic. The principles are actually what's magic. The words are just one example of the principle that can be used in application.
Outstanding. Well, let's get into some examples so that people know what we're talking about. And again, I love the idea because having written, 7 books myself, and I know you can throw everything in there, but the art is making it more simple. I remember when I first started to gave a presentation to the Joint Chiefs for the first time. When I finished, one of the top guy there, he said, "This is really simple. I just wish we would have thought of it." And to me, that was a great compliment because it took a lot of work.
Huge compliment. Huge compliment. I mean, any fool can make something sound more complicated, right? Any fool can do that.
Well, I have read this book. It is an outstanding book. A matter of fact, before we get into an example, let's put that book up on the screen. Look, you're crazy if you don't get this book. It is really, really good because it's practical, loaded with examples. So let's exactly what to say. There you go. Phil, give me an example of a magic word and then how that plays out.
Yeah, we can do. And no, the book is hyper distilled, right? It's the most listened to nonfiction audiobook of all time. You can read it cover to cover in 72 minutes. So the main thing is, what do we leave out of the book more so than what goes in it? But we'll jump to an example and help people understand just how much application can be provided on these. What I'd rather do than grab a random example is, Dan, give me some random context that some of your leaders and listeners are finding themselves in, and I'll look to reach for a relevant example or string of examples that can tie together towards that. And I think this even proves the efficacy of the words, is that I'm not looking for the words to be magic. I'm looking to say, where are there moments that we can be more intentional with language? Well,
knowing that we're all salespeople in a way, because we're selling an idea, a concept, or whatever it is. In other words, that's what influence really is about. A lot of times when we will state something, we will hear, "That was great, and I really liked what I heard. I'll get back to you."
Okay.
And we've all heard, "I'll get back to you." So what's the magic word or words that help keep that from happening?
Okay. There's a few that we can bring towards this. And I think let's deal with prevention before cure. And too often we're like, well, this thing happens, this thing happens, this thing happens. How do I recover? Well, in my world, I would rather not recover. I would rather avoid the obstacle in the first place than need to recover from the thing that tripped me up. So more often than not, the reason we find ourselves in these situations where we lose control is because we gave control away. In the conversation, you create things that are often like a ta-da moment. And what do I mean by that? Is you deliver a presentation and you're like, ta-da, aren't I awesome? And
what do you think? Or something like that.
And expect the other person to understand what the next steps are. Worse than that, we create friction in the conversation. And an example of where we create friction is we finish a presentation and we say things like, "Do you have any questions?" The number of conversations that finish with the question, "Do you have any questions?" just astounds me, because when you finish a presentation with the question, "Do you have any questions?" what are you suggesting the other person should have? You're suggesting they should have some questions, right? You create a space for it. Now, if you did your job right in a sales presentation capacity, chances are all of their questions should be answered. Now you finished a presentation with a question, "Do you have any questions?" Yet you answered all the questions in your presentation, leaving the other person thinking they should be asking questions, yet they have no questions. So you create confusion, you create chaos, you create a puzzle. That's why they say things like, "I feel like I'm missing data." It's not what they say out loud. It's what they say up here. "I'm lacking information to make my decision. Therefore, I must have missed something. Therefore, I need some time to think about it. Leave it with me. Can you send me an email? Can you send me a proposal? Can you send me a brochure?" You created the friction with the question, "Do you have any questions?" Watch how a simple swap now all of a sudden puts you in control. This is lifted straight from the book. Instead of saying, "Do you have any questions?" swap the words to, "What questions do you have for me?" And watch the same person with positivity say, "No questions," which is them admitting with power that they have all the information to make a decision, which means they've already made the decision, which means you don't need to ask them to make a decision. You just need to invite them to take the next steps. And the easiest way to tell somebody how to take the next steps is you quite simply say, the next step is. Like, those are words lifted straight from the book. And when you say to somebody, the next step is, little voice inside head says, oh, okay, in most sets of circumstances. There will always be exceptions. We're not looking at anything that works with 10 out of 10 people. But if you can take something that's not working with 3 out of 10 that does work with 7 out of 10, that's the efficacy that moves the needle in a significant way. Still, some people will slow you down. So I would say...
And you already hit a couple of your keys right there. The swaps.
That's right.
I know is one of your magic words. And, you know, what happens next?
What happens next?
One of your magic words. So there's a couple, I mean, you're integrating a couple of the key phrases in here. I just wanted to pull them out, make sure people are noticing them.
Right. And sometimes we hit points of friction as well, still, where what happens is the other person is not giving you enough of the truth for you to be able to help navigate how to steer it on from here. Is you're feeling like you're getting a stall, or you're getting a push off, or you're getting some polite brush away, but your inside voice says, I don't know enough. And you want to say things to the other person like, tell me what we can do differently. Tell me what needs to happen. Tell me what I'm missing. And when you reach for the words, tell me, what you're delivering is a command order. And when you deliver a command order, you create friction. Look at the difference, right? If you said to a child in your life, like, tell me what you were thinking, it's aggressive. What it does, it creates friction, creates defense, creates excuse. This story math starts to add up that what you've done is resistance is created. If you swap the words tell me to the words help me, what happens is we become pulley and not pushy. So in the same scenario, instead of saying, tell me what would need to happen for us to be able to get this overcome, is you'd say, help me understand what's happening in your organization right now that's preventing you from being able to move forward at this time, or help me understand what the decision-making process is from here so I can understand how to better support it, or help me understand, is there something we could have done differently that would have resulted in a different outcome? What we now get is the truth. Same to if you're in that child scenario, instead of saying, tell me what you were thinking, you could say, hey, honey, help me understand what were you thinking that made you believe that was the right course of action? What do you now get? You get a more improved version of the truth. You created less resistance, which allows the other person to insert, with less friction and less fear, some level of honesty to the conversation that you can navigate further forward from.
Well, one of the phrases I've used for quite a long time that is 4 words, and it's what would it take?
Right.
So if you're a no, and I'm getting a no from you, and it's a strong no,
yeah,
I might say, well, what would it take to get you to say yes to this? And then, of course, be completely quiet and say nothing.
Correct.
And what I found is they spill the beans. They tell you exactly what you think.
Right. And the reason that you can execute on those words so well, Dan, I think it's important to catch this. It's tonality and posture in how you use those words too. Because you can't say, so what would it take? Because that sounds desperate, sounds fearful, sounds aggressive, creates resistance. What you did, even in your tone and your body language, when you delivered the what would it take line, is you got softer, you retreated in the delivery of it. Why? Because you're confused, you're puzzled, you're perplexed as to why somebody is thinking what they're thinking. What this does is it actually digs into some of the work that lives behind our work within exactly what to say, which I think is even more imperative for leaders to understand. Because the reason that you can craft a book that reaches 2.2 million people and growing in 30 languages, because you pull out all the fluff from it, you pull out some of the science from it, and you turn this into the most condensed pill that can travel as far as possible. What I do know that leaders are often thinking is it can't just be the words that are magic. How do I execute at this level as a leader with my people in the moments that matter? And what you're demonstrating here is what we call our second cornerstone of conversational excellence, which is that curiosity is the fuel to great conversation. And a lack of curiosity is costing leaders a fortune right now because they show up with the alternative behavior, one of certainty. And when you show up with certainty, i.e. that you are so sure of yourself, it comes across aggressive And it often results in unnecessary friction created in an outcome. Guard goes up, defense exists, and people either fly or fight back at you when a lack of curiosity is present. By alternative is when you insert curiosity, whether it's either in specific word choices or tonality and phraseology, you create a space that's often a gray space that the other person can play into. So what you did in your example there, it's also how words like help me understand can preface a direct ask that results in you avoiding any fear of aggression. You did it with tonality. When you said, what would it take? But without saying what would it take, you said, what would it take? And the words help me understand to preface words like what would it take, allow you to be able to guarantee yourself that you're going to come from a position of curiosity.
Let me give you a quick little side note. It's a little story that comes to mind. This is about 10 years ago, and there was this young guy. I would say he was maybe in 6th grade, and he was in baseball, playing baseball in the summers, and he wanted to be the pitcher, but he wasn't the pitcher. And he tried to get the coach to get him to pitch, and it was no. And so I said, well, just go up to the coach and say, I'd really like to be the pitcher. What would it take for me to be the pitcher? And then I said, don't say anything and do everything he said. And towards the end of the season, I got a call from his dad. Hey, he's pitching because he did that. So
That's right.
these things, they do really work. But you mentioned something that is really powerful, and it's not just what we say, it's how we say them.
Yes.
It's the tonality. In other words, am I giving you, there's one answer, one right answer, and that's it? And by the way, there's always more than one right answer.
Correct.
And it's my way or the highway. That's not going to float too well either.
Resist.
Well, I think that's another key to what you're teaching, is to eliminate resistance, or eliminate all of these things, and make it easy for me to say yes, make it comfortable for me to say yes.
Well, or to say maybe in the direction of yes. And I think too many people are looking for a conversation to reach a predetermined finish line, and that finish line is finite. What we're learning in today's world is that the finish line keeps getting pushed out. We're looking to be in a never-ending conversation. Even when it's down to innovation, it's what's next. So what now? So we're always in play. We're always fluid. Yet we've grown up in a world where people want there to be right and wrong. We want black and white. Where you and I agree on a lot of things is the ability to play with efficacy in the gray space between those places. And if you can create a vehicle that people can confidently play in the gray space, that's where some of the best ideas are made, right? That's where people can start to be able to volunteer new angles. When you remove right and wrong and you create better and worse, then what we can do is create movement. All the examples of words in exactly what to say reduce friction, provide a gray space that becomes a play space and in turn a safe space for people to have more honest conversations, for people to have more bravery about speaking their mind, and for people to be able to be bolder about the asks they make from others without being aggressive. That's what allows more to be able to happen. And rereading the book, even understanding that, you're like, oh, that is strategically inserting curiosity to a conversation to create a space where the other person tells the truth. Oh, look, that's demonstrating a level of empathy that shows we're on the same side trying to achieve the same outcome. Oh, that's allowing us to ask a big, bold, courageous question without it feeling like it's coming from left of field. All they are is tools to add efficacy to the asks that people want to make in their life, where they either soften, demonstrate empathy, or provide padding for courageous asks. It is that simple. And I feel like the leaders that are communicating on this, when they reread the book, they'll see some new levels of intelligence behind it, because it isn't the words that are magic. It's the words are examples and vehicles of allowing people to have more courage, be more empathetic, be more curious in conversations.
Well, one of the words that magic words is don't worry. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about if I have a fear or a concern, and just talk about don't worry and how that might be used a little bit.
Yeah. And when we work through certification programs and longer term, bigger bodies of work with exactly what to say, we categorize the words into tools so people understand what sequences of words are best used for what sets of circumstances. The words "don't worry" sit in a category we call labeling. And when it comes to labeling from a vocabulary point of view, bring it to the simplicity of, if you had a number of items in a pantry in your kitchen and you walked into your pantry and nothing was labeled and everything was in the same containers, we'd struggle to be able to understand what was in there, and we'd certainly find it difficult to find what we're looking for. Labels help us acknowledge and accept what is true in a rapid fire period of time. So the minute you can insert a label in language, people accept it to be true, providing you use that label with integrity. So the word "don't worry" creates instant relief. The mistake what people make is they follow the words "don't worry" with something that they cannot promise to be true. I do a lot of work in the real estate space. So they'd be like, "Don't worry, we'll definitely get the next one," when somebody misses out on the buying of a home. I'm like, that's not correct application, because you cannot guarantee the promise that exists the other side.
Very good.
What you could say is, you could say, "Don't worry, there is new inventory coming to the market all the time. And when something comes up that you like in the future, we are better positioned to be able to get the next one." So you can only use "don't worry" statements effectively if what you're saying behind it is unequivocally true. If there's ambiguity in your "don't worry" statement, now we got a problem, because what you've done is you just said, "I can't trust you." So the right set of words used in the wrong way can actually move you away from your outcome. We've seen it, right? Where maybe a friend or family member, when something was going wrong, just says, "Well, don't worry, everything's going to work out for the best."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Thanks for being useless. I just understand you have zero value to add towards my concerns at this period of time." If the same person
using one of your things, like, well, here's what happens now, which is another one of your phrases, which is now giving me, oh, well, there's more to the story. There's something else.
And we're adding layers and layers and layers. So when people read the book, what they do is they think about the words in isolation. They think it's like this word for that, which is partially true. It's like you can use a key on a piano to do one job, but if you want to make music, you got to learn how to use them all together. And I think that's where skill and practice and refinement comes into play. That's where it becomes less about something you're doing to someone and something you're doing for someone. And I think that starts to have us realizing that understanding how to use language is leadership optimization. We all have so few moments that we have to be face-to-face or in front of an audience or able to steer a conversation. And our first cornerstone of conversational excellence is that the worst time to think about the thing you're going to say is in the moment when you're saying it.
Exactly.
Right. And I know you talk about, the power of anticipation and how you can lead more effectively if you're more anticipatory. Is so many of the conversations that we are stepping into could be insanely more effective if we pre-brief them as opposed to debrief them. So many conversations people think they want to show up for are conversations that people just want to feel the moment out and wing it, when in reality what they should have done is prepared for that moment. So if something became left of field, that they could navigate and be more present. And what else happens in a conversational point of view? People come away from them thinking shoulda, woulda, coulda. Now, you can't change the past, but you can change the known future. And there are so many moments of known future. People think that every conversation they have on repeat as a leader is different. Now, I would argue there are differences. I'd probably also argue is that there are more similarities than there are differences. So what you can do is you can prepare for the known, which helps you become better prepared for the unknown. And where every human being on the planet has desktop files, Dropbox folders, Google Drive of templated written documents for situations that show up on repeat, where they will customize and edit in order to create a bespoke solution to the person they're looking at. You can do the same in spoken word too, if you do the work to be ready for the known moments.
Yeah, and it takes practice. It's just like you mentioned piano playing before, and I play a number of instruments, including the piano. And I know if you sit down in the beginning and you learn how to make a C chord, and then you go back, you'll have to try to remember how to make a C chord. But after you start playing, you don't think like that at all. You're free. So that's, again, where getting, it's just like with the people that have studied my work and learning systems and so on. I want it to become part of them. I think of it as unconsciously competent.
Yeah. And you got
where
to give it away, right? Give it away.
they can just use it. And again, I know when you're teaching the people that you're training to do your work, because there's only one Phil, just like there's only one Dan, what we want to do is, this is important. We want to get it out to as many people as possible, and we get other people to learn how to do this. And again, what we want them to be is unconsciously competent, so they can teach others to be that way as well.
Correct. And we've learned hard on that through our guides program too, is this isn't work you master, it's work you practice. Just like yoga or meditation or anything else that is never ending, is you don't ever get to a finish line. It's just a conscious decision that you understand that your vocal range and your choice of vocabulary is a tool to help you get your job done. And it's one of the most important tools to help you get your job done. Let's keep focusing on being able to level up. And we have people come through our 2-day certification program that get to the end of it and they're like, oh, I just became consciously incompetent and now need to put some practice in with some new levels where they're going to go back. And then they come back again and they're like, oh, I think I'm getting this. And then they come back again and say, hey, I want to have another go at this again. And then they get to a point where it's working in their day job. And then they then say, well, I'm going to raise the stakes again as to how I can operate with this language at a higher level. And then they play again and they'll go through the exact same body of content time and time again and take completely different lessons from it each and every time, which gives me so much joy because it shows that people are growing. Right? If they are taking new lessons from the same material, they're growing. And it's like when you revisit a TV series that you loved and you see new levels of details and you start to find out why you loved it and the intelligence and character development that you missed the first time. Peeling back the layers is such a joy. But what we've done uniquely within our guides program, which are the licensed partners that deliver the work, is they all stand in front of the work. So they're experienced practitioners of being able to bring this into their world, that they develop their own stories, their own application, their own nuances around the niches in which they serve. And they're not disciples of my work. They're practitioners of the work in their world, and they're disciples of their own experience. And that allows scale with authenticity, as opposed to the historic model of how people have scaled IP, which is you cannot change it. You have to preach it this way round, and you do it my way or no way. From the start, we've been giving it away. And my belief is that the principles are so tight, you can't break it. And therefore what you can do is breathe new life into it with other people's experience and other people's application.
Yeah, I can relate to that totally with what I'm trying to do too. Let's remember, again, we've got leaders from all over the world watching this right now. And what would be, and I want to dig more because there's more magic words that we haven't talked about yet, but what are some actions that maybe leaders of mid-size or smaller companies could take based on what we've talked about so far? I mean, obviously I want them to get the book, but if we put that to the side, what can they do? What are some things they should be seriously considering right away?
Let's take this and make it super practical for people. Is I mentioned that first cornerstone of conversational excellence, that the worst time to think about the thing you're going to say is in the moment when you're saying it. The key word in that statement is the word moment. Lots of people decide they want to get better at communication. They want to get better at conversation. In my experience of having tried this now with over 800 different industries, you cannot just generally get better at communication or conversation. You have to decide where to focus. And that means deciding your critical conversations. My belief is that every single human being on the planet should be working 3 critical conversations at all time. One in their personal life, one in their role as a leader, and one that's going to have commercial impact on their world, put money in their pocket. We should always be able to pick 3. And when I say moments, I'm talking microscopic moments, the cog in the machine that is having the biggest impact on the potential outcome that you're looking for. So I'll share with you what I would class as a critical conversation. I think it might help leaders. The personal critical conversation that I'm working on right now is, as somebody who travels a lot, and I leave for work and I'm back from work, and I leave for work and I'm back from work, spend a lot of days on the road, is the most important conversation for me to focus on in my personal life at this time is what comes out of my mouth in the first 15 seconds when I re-enter the home from a trip. If I get that wrong, what does it do to my evening? If I get that wrong, what does it do to my weekend? If I get that wrong, what does it do to my marriage? If I get that wrong, what does it do in turn for my life? I cannot think of a more important critical conversation in my world right now than that one. So why would I work on anything else? And that micro moment in time is the thing that I'm focused on. And then the same in, as a professional speaker, I could decide that the critical conversation that I'm working on right now is the post-speech follow-on moment, side stage with event organizer and VP or president of company about exploring possibilities to introduce my friends or to develop further work. I'm too busy enjoying the applause and photos and selfies to get masterful at how do I navigate next steps from there. I'm not saying I'm not good at it. I'm just not as good at it as I like to be. So I could choose to focus everything on there. And as a leader, I know I don't have enough structure in the way that I lead the key players in my team. We've changed a number of things around. So what's the critical conversation to focus on there? It's committing to the monthly meeting and making sure that the work before the work is in place for that monthly meeting, and the 60 minutes we decide as an exec leadership team to get together every month, that I'm prepared for, that I'm hyper-focused for, that I can deliver at the highest levels. And the thing for me would be, is if I could just turn up my efficacy on just those 3 conversations alone, what difference would that make to me as a person, as a leader, and my bank balance? It would be significant. So why focus anywhere else? Now what can happen is if you decide your 3 critical conversations, you can then pick up the book and say, screw the examples that Phil wrote in the book. How could I craft my own examples or give consideration to how those words would help me in the moments that I've decided are most important to me? And to the leaders in your community here, choose your moments. The gig is to master the moments, not remember the words. Mm-hmm. And if you're not deciding the moments that you're looking to influence, then what you've got is beautiful Christmas decorations and no tree to hang them on. Right. So decide the tree you want, where you want the tree, and then you can look to the ornaments and say, how am I going to utilize these to decorate my tree? That would be the action I'd be inviting leaders to take. Decide their critical conversations, one personal, one professional, one as a leader, and say, here's where I'm working on up-leveling my communication and my conversation skills. The magic here, though, Dan, is when you focus hyper-specific, then what happens is its impact is wide. When you focus wide, no impact.
Yeah, exactly. I think scarcity brings abundance. Abundance brings scarcity.
That's right.
In other words, if you can do anything, you can't think of what to do. But if things are limited down, all of a sudden you can think of abundant things to do.
That's right.
So, and again, we're talking about another way of looking at it as the power of focus. Well, we have our time is ticking, and there's some more couple of magic phrases I'd love for you to share with us. Why don't you mentioned some categories earlier?
Yeah,
labels were one.
Yeah.
What are some of the other categories that all of your magic words fit in? Because I'd love to hear those, and maybe an example or two. That would be really.
I will share and walk these through and I'll give some context to this too. Is you write a little tiny book. People sometimes ask you questions. Where's the rest of it? Right? Where's the rest of it? Where's the other method in the madness? And we have that through our workshops and certifications. Also, when you sell 1 million copies of a record, you get presented with a gold disc in the music business. When you sell 1 million copies of a book, what you get is nothing. Nothing. Nobody cares. Yep. So what I did is I created my own commemorative edition of the book, which is the expansion edition that is, hard-covered, luxury dust jacket. It is the categorization of the words. It's 32 sequences as opposed to 23. It's the work that then carried into the workshop with the methodology around it. But I'll walk through the categories so we can understand what they're about. First category is what we call rejection-free opening formulas. So how do you put a ball into play? How do you put an idea on somebody's agenda? How do you get to a point of being able to start a conversation with somebody? We go from rejection-free opening formulas to perspective changes. Because what you cannot ever do is to change somebody's mind. You can only change their vantage point that they're looking at something from. So they go on to change their own mind. So sequences of words to nudge people's perception around so they start looking at things from a different point of view. From perspective changes, we move to a set of categories called assumptive frames. And assumptive frames are tools to allow you to accelerate the decision-making process to get people towards an outcome slightly quicker. We go from assumptive frames to labeling that we mentioned earlier. And then following labeling, there's 2 more categories that we work towards. One is staying in the game, which historically might have been called things like objection handling. But my phraseology around that are these are sequences of words to allow us to stay in the conversation when previously we might have had to bail, jump and run, give up, stick tail between the legs. And the final category of sequence of words are making conversations count. Like, how do you get more from the conversations that you're already having? Because it isn't just about counting conversations, it's about making them count. So why don't we just give one example from each
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Understand how that would work. So firstly, let's start with a rejection-free opening formula. Is if I wanted somebody to consider an idea of mine, I wouldn't ask them to directly consider the idea. I'd position it to the left or right of them, and I'd say something like, I'm not sure if it's for you. When I say I'm not sure if it's for you, subconscious brain says a few things. It firstly says, well, I'll be the judge of that. Takes responsibility for the fact a decision needs to be made, and that decision is mine to make. And the second thing that happens is curiosity is piqued. It's like, what is it? I have to be able to follow the next part of the story. What we then do is we put the word but behind that. So it says, I'm not sure if it's for you, but. And the reason the word but exists here is not because of its traditional sense of negating what was said prior. It actually just shifts the focus to next. So when I say to somebody, I'm not sure if it's for you, but, then what they really think is you probably want to take a look at this. So I'm not sure if it's for you, but there's an event I'm going to in the fall that I thought might be a good fit. Hey, I'm not sure if it's for you, but there's an opening coming up in another division that you might be a great candidate for. Hey, I'm not sure if it's for you, but there are 3 other ways that I could think of that could potentially work better. See, these are rejection-free opening. The mistake that people make is they try to use them as closing techniques. The goal is to put ball in play because curiosity is the fuel. The goal I'm looking for from a rejection-free opening is tell me some more about that. Not, yes, please.
Perfect.
Now we can have a bigger conversation. We create a frame of reference that allows us to be able to have a bigger conversation. Even side stage with a client. I'm not sure if it's for you, but there are some other ways we could expand on this learning today. See, I've got to leave it half done for them to be able to say, tell me some more about that. Not, I'm not sure if it's for you, but I run a program that can be beneficial for these people that has these details and this price point that is available in this way. That creates friction. Just ball in play. Tell me some more about that. So there's a rejection-free opening. I'm not sure if it's for you, but. No emphasis on the word but, emphasis on what comes the other side of the word but to create the curiosity gap. If I'm looking for a perspective changer, how do I shift somebody's viewpoint on what it is that they're currently thinking? Then I might be able to use a what is your experience preface. So quite often, let's just use the example of the professional speaking industry. If I'm concerned that somebody may or may not have the ability to invest in services at the level of like yours and I's, I might say, what is your experience of working with a paid professional speaker? Now, somebody has to answer that question with some specificity. What is your experience of working with a paid professional speaker? They'll tell me the truth. Now, somebody's either going to say, well, last year we hired Barack Obama, and the year prior to that, it was Tony Robbins, and before that, we had Brené Brown. Am I now concerned that they have fee constraints? Probably not so much. Whereas if I say, what is your experience of working with a paid professional speaker? And they say, well, this is the first time we've hired somebody external. Up until right now, we've worked with industry speakers or people inside the company to be able to deliver. I've got new context. I've shifted their perspective. Look at the words. What is your experience of working with a paid professional speaker? I'm quite clearly saying I'm not working for nothing. Also, I've created a curiosity gap that gives me back control to be able to re-educate on the landscape in its entirety, plus the part that I play within that landscape. I've just shifted some perspective. Help them perhaps realize that it is not a compliment or a gift to invite me to spend 3 days away from my family and not pay me for the privilege, right? Shifted perspective in one question. And the perspective changes that we have are even better when they're stacked. One on top of the next, on top of the next, because you might move them 2 degrees, but you want to move them 18 degrees. So you need 3, 4, 5 of them. And I view it as chess moves when everybody else is trying to play checkers. How do you get to the outcome you're looking for in a multiple series of plays? But that was just one example of a perspective changer. If I'm looking at assumptive frames, I'm trying to accelerate the speed of decision. If somebody's being asked to make a complex decision, complex decisions are hard to make. So how do I make complex decisions simpler? Well, I present them a series of options. Brain science will teach you that if you limit the number of options, choosing becomes easier. There is an optimum number of choices that makes decision making the easiest, and that optimum number of choices that makes decision making the easiest is 3. We can choose between 3 options easier than we can choose between 2, 4, 5, or any number greater. Choosing between 3 options is something we feel smart, capable, and good to be able to do as humans. So if somebody's having a difficulty making a decision, and I said, well, the way I see it is you have 3 options, instant relief, ability to now be able to say, I can make up my own mind from here. I'm empowered to make up my own mind. If you use those words intelligently, now all of a sudden you can help people decide which one to pick. Because I could say to you, Dan, a conference, you have 3 options for dinner. You have the chicken, the steak, or the vegetarian option. I'm pretty sure you'd pick without too much thought, right? You could tick whatever box was the right one for you without a second thought. And what would you pick?
Vegetarian.
Okay, because you've got a pre-existing decision-making process that allows you to be able to jump to that conclusion quickly. Now, in big decisions, sometimes that can become more challenging. So say, for example, here you are at a fancy vegan restaurant, and I'm saying, hey, Dan, you've got 3 options. What you've got is you've got the beet salad, you've got the rainbow rigatoni, and you've got the Brussels souffle. You're like, this just got a touch harder, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So what you've got to be able to do is you've got to stack it. And now when you give people 3 options to accelerate the decision-making process, then what you're going to do is the first option, you're going to make a hard, ugly choice. The second option, you're going to make something they definitely don't want. And the third option is going to be the thing that you'd like them to be able to have. So I might say, well, the way I see it is you have 3 options. What you can do is you could reach for the beet salad, but it's largely a very small portion. It probably doesn't make up a complete entree. It has some nice flavor to it, but it certainly isn't the signature dish. Alternatively, what you could do is you could do the Brussels souffle. However, know that that has some eggs in it, know that that has some other things in it, and it is something that is shipped in externally. Or alternatively, what you could have is the signature dish of this restaurant is you could have the rainbow delight that is the chef's own creation, that is the thing that has been written around and won 3 Michelin stars. I mean, you do you, Dan. You do whatever thing you think is best. I know where you're going, right? I know which one you're choosing,
Exactly.
because I'm accelerating the speed of decision by taking all of the options, giving you just 3, and then stacking the 3 in a way that is allowing you to be able to lead towards an outcome that you're looking for. So we can do that in any scenario. That's an assumptive frame, giving people 3 options, steering them towards a quicker decision. Labeling, we talked about earlier. We gave the example of don't worry is a label. Here's another label that is particularly powerful. It's for when you want to tell people what to do without them feeling like they're being told what to do, because you know they want to know what to do without feeling pushed. This is leadership, right? So when you're looking to tell somebody what to do without them feeling like they're being told what to do, borrow some brain science that human beings are a lot like sheep. We take great confidence in the fact that people before us have moved in a certain way, and we're happy to follow a pack. That's why we'll believe 37 strangers on a Yelp review before any recommendation from a mother-in-law. And safety in numbers, telling people what to do. What you do when you want to tell somebody what to do without them feeling like they're being told, you simply share with them, here is what most people would do. And when you share with somebody, here's what most people would do in your circumstances, voice kicks up and says, aha, I'm most people. So I'm going to choose to do that, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. I do know that there are exceptions to that rule. There are people listening here right now that would say there's no way that that would work on me because I am not most people. I get that. So what would I say to those people? If I had the emotional intelligence to read that, I would say, don't be like most people. And they go, okay, I won't. And I can take 95 or 5 as long as I know who I'm talking to with the words most people. So rejection-free openers, perspective changers, assumptive frames, labeling. What we then got is ways that we can stay in the game. And I gave an example of that earlier. The words like help me understand.
Right.
Used to preface what would it take? Because now what we get is we get context, right? We are hyper securing curiosity back in the other direction. Teach me the context, then I can give you new content to go into that context to help you shift your perspective, change your mind.
Yeah,
So
very
I'll
good.
bounce through that one and land the plane saying, well, how do you make more of your conversations count? And this can be remarkably simple. I'd encourage every leader in this conversation to think about how they could execute on this, because you all have multiple conversations that you finished thinking were successful, but actually had other levels of success available if you were prepared to hang on for a moment. One of the greatest salespeople on the planet that has never lived is a guy by the name of Columbo, an 80s TV detective. Columbo, as an 80s TV detective, was masterful at asking questions. I mean, insanely good at interrogating and getting information out of people. Yet one thing he did that taught me a huge lesson is he'd often look to finish a conversation. He'd leave the conversation, he'd retreat towards the door. The person he was quizzing felt like they got away without sharing the key piece of information. He'd reach for the door, he'd raise his index finger and come back and say, oh, just one more thing. And when he would say just one more thing, he'd have a completely captive window to be able to ask one more question. And when asking that one more question, he would quite often collect the key piece of evidence that would allow him to go on to solve the crime. Now, we are not in the business of solving crimes, yet we could be in the business of creating Columbo moments. What do I mean by that is that before you finish the Zoom, before you walk out of the meeting, before you leave the stage, before you hang up the phone, could you create a just one more thing moment? And the answer to the question is, well, of course you could. And when you create that moment, what could you collect in that moment? The answer is a lot. You could get referrals, you could get recommendations, you could get reviews. But more often than not, sometimes you just want more information. So that might be insights from an employee. Is, hey, just one more thing is, what are some of the things that you love about working here?
Yeah.
Could be from a client scenario, like, hey, just one more thing is what is it about us that meant that you decided to choose us despite all of the other competition that you could have gone with? And what are we doing? We're getting data, we're learning in the front row from the people that we are looking to be able to learn from. And a tiny application to how you could ask a questionnaire following a Columbo moment, a 2-question questionnaire, where the answers to this 2-question questionnaire will fundamentally change the way you do business, I think might be useful to your leaders. Just 2 questions in a questionnaire. First question is this: what 3 things do you like best about? What 3 things do you like best about our food? What 3 things do you like best about our service? What 3 things best about working here? Whatever 3 things you like best that you want to aim at. When you ask somebody what 3 things they like best, what they share with you is some really useful insights, because they give you answers in a very specific way. The first answer they give you is the first thing they could think of. Not necessarily the most important. It's just, it came here, it came out of mouth. Still got 2 more tries. Just like if you're playing darts or trying to shoot hoops and you've got 3 to shoot with at the fairground, the first throw is just, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
The second is almost always the most important thing. If you said, what 3 things do you like best about this restaurant? First thing you could think of, most important thing, comes second. The third thing they then give you is their favorite nice to have, i.e. the sprinkles on top of cupcake, the extra pleasant thing. And Dan, we both know each other from the National Speakers Association. What 3 things do you like best about the National Speakers Association? You think on it for a second, and first thing that comes out, I love all the people. Great, got it. And what else? Well, I love that we have these focused events and energy that we come together, and the side conversations that we have with everybody add a richness and tapestry and a friendship and camaraderie, etc. Oh, and what else? Well, we get some bonuses and some discounts out of our membership that allow us to access some tools at more preferential rates. Favorite nice to have. But what you then get is the ability to ask the second question in this questionnaire, the one we really wanted the answer to. If there was one thing you could change about us, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, right.
And now, because of the way they've stacked it, they tell you the truth.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, we're at a time where I got to get one more thing in. And first of all, let's show Phil's book. Let's get that in there. Make sure you check out that website too. It's loaded with good stuff, good resources. Secondly, let's look at the 3 books that, you've got many books, but exactly where to start, exactly how to sell. Those are other outstanding books, as well as more from Phil if you go to his website. And Phil, what we really have come across with is what I've discovered long ago too, and that is it's all about psychology.
Mm-hmm.
it's because we're human beings in this
People.
technical world. And the power of words and the words we use are so important. And we need to not just react in the moment, but pre-thinking, anticipating a little bit before we have those critical conversations is really important. Thank you so much, Phil. You were amazing. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan. Thank you for sharing me with your people.
Thank you.